The crimson dawn of New Terra cast long shadows across the crystalline spires of the Royal Terran Administrative Complex. Admiral James Hartwell stood at the viewport of his flagship, the HMS Indomitable, watching the massive space station rotate slowly against the backdrop of distant stars. 23 years he had served the Terran Commonwealth, rising through the ranks from a lowly ensign to the most decorated naval officer in human space. Yet today, he felt more nervous than he had during the Battle of Proxima Centauri. The message from Earth had arrived via quantum relay 3 days ago. His Majesty King Charles XIV requested his immediate presence at the royal station for a matter of utmost importance to the realm. The formality of the language had sent shivers down James's spine. In all his years of service, he had never been summoned personally by the crown. Military honors, yes. State dinners, occasionally. But, a private audience with the sovereign of humanity's greatest empire? That was unprecedented. Admiral, we're receiving docking clearance from Royal Station Command, his aide, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, announced from behind him. Her voice carried the crisp efficiency that had made her invaluable during their campaigns against the Zephyrian pirates in the Outer Rim. James nodded, adjusting the ceremonial sword at his side. The ancient blade had belonged to his great-grandfather, Admiral Sir William Hartwell, who had commanded the first human fleet to venture beyond the Sol system. The irony wasn't lost on him that he might be about to make history of his own. The docking procedure took 47 minutes, each moment stretching like an eternity. Royal Station was a marvel of human engineering, a massive rotating habitat that served as the seat of government for the Terran Commonwealth's 47 colony worlds. Its outer ring housed the diplomatic quarters where alien ambassadors conducted their business with humanity. The middle section contained the administrative offices that governed an empire spanning 12 light years. But, it was the central hub that drew James's attention, the Crystal Palace where the king held court. As the Indomitable settled into its berth, James could see the honor guard assembled on the dock. 50 Marines in their dress uniforms, their plasma rifles held at attention, formed a corridor leading to the royal transport. The sight stirred something deep in his chest, a mixture of pride and trepidation that he hadn't felt since his first combat mission. The airlock cycled with a soft hiss, and James stepped onto the polished deck of Royal Station. The artificial gravity was set to Earth normal, a welcome relief after weeks in the variable gravity of his ship. The Marines snapped to attention as he passed, their synchronized movement a testament to human discipline that had impressed even the rigid Centaurians. Captain Sir Reginald Morrison, the king's personal aide-de-camp, waited at the far end of the corridor. Morrison was a man of average height but commanding presence, his scarred face telling the story of the siege of New Edinburgh where he had earned the Victoria Cross. "Admiral Hartwell," he said, his voice carrying the refined accent of old Earth nobility. "His Majesty is expecting you in the throne room. If you would follow me." The journey through Royal Station's corridors was a tour of human achievement. Holographic displays showed real-time images from across the Commonwealth, from the terraforming operations on Kepler 442b to the massive mining operations in the asteroid belts of Wolf 359. Agricultural worlds fed billions, while industrial planets produced the ships and technology that kept humanity's empire running. It was a testament to what the human species had accomplished in just 2 centuries since leaving Earth. The throne room itself was a marvel of understated elegance. Unlike the ostentatious displays of wealth favored by some alien cultures, the human royal chamber emphasized functionality and tradition. The walls were lined with portraits of previous monarchs and heroes of the realm, from Admiral Nelson to Admiral Saracen Martinez, the first human to make contact with alien intelligence. At the far end of the room, beneath a massive viewport showing the stars beyond, sat the throne of Terra. King Charles XIV rose as James entered, and the admiral immediately dropped to one knee. At 68, the king retained the bearing of the career naval officer he had been before ascending to the throne. His uniform was simple but immaculate, adorned only with the ribbons representing his own service during the colonial wars and the small crown that marked his sovereignty over humanity's stellar empire. "Rise, Admiral," the king said, his voice warm but carrying an undertone of gravity. "We have much to discuss, and little time for excessive ceremony. James stood, meeting his sovereign's gaze directly. "Your Majesty, I am at your service." The king gestured to a pair of chairs arranged near the viewport. As they sat, James could see the bustling activity of the station below, ships coming and going, carrying the commerce and communication that bound humanity's scattered worlds together. "James," the king began, using his first name in a way that immediately signaled the informal nature of their conversation, "I've been reviewing your service record. 23 years of distinguished service, from your first posting on the frontier to your recent victory against the Zephyrian pirates. You've served the realm with honor and distinction." "Thank you, Your Majesty. I've been privileged to serve." Charles leaned forward slightly, his expression growing more serious. "The galaxy is changing, Admiral. The Galactic Council grows more hostile to human expansion with each passing year. The Andromedans press our borders in the Outer Rim, testing our resolve. The trade routes that bring prosperity to our worlds face increasing piracy and sabotage. Humanity needs leaders who can navigate these challenges." James nodded, understanding beginning to dawn. "What do you need from me, sire?" "I need someone I can trust absolutely to command our forces in what may become humanity's greatest trial," the king said. "The intelligence services have uncovered evidence of a conspiracy among several alien species to contain human expansion, possibly through military action. We may be facing a war unlike any we've fought before." The weight of the revelation settled on James like a physical force. Humanity had always been the newcomers to the galactic community, barely 200 years since achieving faster-than-light travel. Most alien species had been spacefaring for millennia. If they truly intended to stop human expansion through force, the Commonwealth would face odds that made their previous conflicts seem like skirmishes. "I understand the gravity of the situation, Your Majesty," James said. "What role would you have me play?" The king stood and walked to the viewport, his hands clasped behind his back. "I'm creating a new position, Admiral. Lord High Commander of the Stellar Fleet, with authority over all Commonwealth naval forces and the power to coordinate with planetary defense forces as needed. The position comes with a title that hasn't been used in 3 centuries. James felt his heart skip a beat. The last Lord High Commander had been appointed during Earth's darkest hour, when alien invasion seemed imminent. The position carried authority second only to the crown itself in military matters. "The title," Charles continued, turning back to face him, "is Duke of Wessex. It carries with it command authority over the Wessex Naval District, including the Sol system and our core industrial worlds. More importantly, it grants you the power to speak with my voice in military matters when time doesn't permit consultation." The silence stretched between them for long moments. James understood that he was being offered not just a promotion, but a responsibility that could shape the future of humanity among the stars. The Duke of Wessex would be the human race's primary military leader at a time when their very survival might hang in the balance. "Your Majesty," James said finally, "I'm honored by your trust. But, I must ask, why me? There are senior admirals with more experience in fleet command." Charles smiled, the expression transforming his face. "Because, James, you've never fought a battle you were expected to win. At Proxima Centauri, you defeated a force 3 times your size through tactical brilliance and sheer audacity. Against the Zephyrian pirates, you took a ragtag collection of patrol ships and turned them into the most effective anti-piracy force in the galaxy. When other commanders see impossible odds, you see opportunities." He paused, looking back out at the stars. "Humanity has always been the underdog in galactic affairs. We've survived and thrived not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through ingenuity, determination, and the willingness to do what others consider impossible. Those are the qualities we'll need in the trials ahead." James stood, understanding that his life was about to change irrevocably. "I accept, Your Majesty. When would you like me to take up the position?" "Immediately," Charles said. "The formal ceremony will take place tomorrow, but I need you to begin preparations today. Captain Morrison will brief you on the intelligence we've gathered and introduce you to your new staff. Your flagship will be the HMS Sovereign, the newest and most powerful warship in the fleet. As if summoned by his words, Captain Morrison appeared in the doorway. Your Majesty, the briefing materials are prepared, and Admiral Hartwell's quarters have been arranged. The king extended his hand to James. Welcome to the inner circle, Admiral. Or should I say, Your Grace. Tomorrow, we'll make the appointment public and announce the formation of the new command structure. Today, you learn just how precarious humanity's position has become. As they shook hands, James felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. Somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, forces were moving that could determine whether humanity would continue its expansion among the galaxies or be confined to a handful of worlds under alien oversight. The thought filled him not with fear, but with the familiar surge of adrenaline that had carried him through every battle of his career. He was no longer just Admiral James Hartwell. He was about to become the Duke of Wessex, Lord High Commander of the Stellar Fleet, and possibly humanity's last hope for maintaining their freedom among the stars. The game was about to begin, and the stakes had never been higher. The intelligence briefing room was a stark contrast to the elegant throne room. Located deep within Royal Station's secure core, the chamber was lined with quantum-encrypted displays and protected by dampening fields that prevented any form of electronic eavesdropping. Admiral James Hartwell, soon to be Duke of Wessex, sat at the head of a polished table while Captain Morrison activated the holographic projectors. What you're about to see, Morrison began, his voice carrying the weight of classified information, represents 6 months of intelligence gathering by our best operatives throughout known space. The picture it paints is disturbing. The central hologram materialized into a three-dimensional map of local galactic space. Human colonies appeared as blue points of light, scattered across 47 star systems in a rough sphere centered on Earth. Surrounding them, in colors ranging from yellow to deep red, were the territories of 17 different alien species. The Galactic Council has existed for over 2,000 years, Morrison continued, highlighting a massive station orbiting the neutron star Pulsar 7. Humanity was admitted as a junior member 23 years ago, primarily due to our rapid expansion and technological innovation. However, several species have grown increasingly concerned about what they term human aggression. James leaned forward, studying the display. Aggression? We've established defensive colonies on uninhabited worlds and maintained peaceful relations with all our neighbors. From our perspective, yes, Morrison agreed. But consider this from an alien viewpoint. In 2 centuries, humanity has gone from a single world to 47 colonies. The Centaurians took 800 years to establish half that many settlements. The Rigelians have maintained the same borders for over a millennium. To them, our expansion rate is unprecedented and potentially threatening. A new layer of data appeared on the hologram, showing shipping routes and communication lines. 6 months ago, our signals intelligence began detecting encrypted communications between several council species. The encryption was sophisticated, but our quantum computers eventually broke it. The display shifted, showing transcripts of intercepted messages. James read them with growing alarm. References to the human problem and containment protocols appeared repeatedly. Most disturbing were discussions of military assets being quietly repositioned near human space. The conspiracy, Morrison said, appears to be led by the Andromedans, with support from the Tausetians and the Vegan Empire. Together, they represent the 3 most militarily powerful species in the local galactic neighborhood. The Andromedans alone possess a fleet larger than all human naval forces combined. James stood and walked around the table, studying the hologram from different angles. The Andromedan territory formed a crescent around human space to the galactic east, while the Tausetians controlled key trade routes to the north. The Vegan Empire, humanity's oldest contact among the stars, dominated the southern approaches to Sol. What's their endgame? James asked. Surely they don't intend to exterminate humanity. The galactic community would never accept genocide. Morrison's expression grew grimmer. Not extermination, containment. Their plan appears to involve forcing humanity to accept strict limits on expansion, coupled with economic sanctions that would make new colonies financially impossible. They would allow us to maintain our existing worlds but prevent any further growth. The implication struck James immediately. Humanity's economy depended on expansion. New colonies provided resources, markets, and opportunities that supported the entire Commonwealth. Economic stagnation would lead to social unrest, which could fracture humanity's unity and reduce them to insignificance in galactic affairs. Timeline? James asked. The intercepted communications suggest they plan to present their ultimatum at the next Galactic Council session, 6 months from now. If humanity refuses to accept the limitations voluntarily, they're prepared to enforce them through blockade and, if necessary, limited military action. James returned to his seat, his mind racing through possibilities. 6 months to prepare for a conflict that could involve multiple alien fleets, each possessing technology that was at least equal to humanity's most advanced ships. The Commonwealth Navy was well-trained and highly motivated, but they would be outnumbered by at least 5 to 1. "What assets do we have?" he asked. Morrison touched a control, and the hologram shifted to show current deployments of Commonwealth forces. 67 ships of the line, 234 frigates and destroyers, and approximately 400 patrol craft. Our newest ships, like the Sovereign, incorporate quantum shielding and plasma cannon arrays that are competitive with the best alien technology. However, our older vessels would be significantly outgunned in a direct confrontation. Industrial capacity? Earth's shipyards can produce 1 battleship every 8 months, with smaller vessels on proportionally shorter timelines. The industrial worlds of New Birmingham and Sheffield Station can each match Earth's output. Our limiting factor is trained crew, not production capacity. James nodded, already forming preliminary strategies. What about our allies? Are there species within the Council that might support us? The Procyon have indicated quiet sympathy for our position, Morrison replied. They're a younger species, only 700 years spacefaring, and they remember facing similar pressures from older civilizations. However, they lack the military strength to significantly affect the balance of power. The Arcturians maintain strict neutrality in all conflicts, but their territory controls several key hyperspace routes. Their position could be crucial in any extended conflict. The briefing continued for another 3 hours, covering everything from alien military capabilities to potential economic warfare strategies. By the end, James had a clear picture of humanity's predicament. They faced opponents with superior numbers and equivalent technology, who possessed the advantage of choosing the time and place of confrontation. As the session concluded, Morrison handed him a data pad containing his new orders and command structure. "Your staff has been selected from the best officers in the fleet," he said. "Commander Saracen will serve as your chief of staff. Admiral Patricia Blackwood will command the home fleet, while Admiral Marcus Webb takes charge of frontier operations." James reviewed the names with satisfaction. Each officer represented the best of human military tradition, leaders who had proven themselves in combat against pirates, smugglers, and the occasional alien incursion. If humanity was going to face impossible odds, at least they would do so with the right people in command. "One more thing," Morrison added, lowering his voice. "His Majesty wanted me to convey something personally. The title of Duke of Wessex comes with more than just military authority. The original Dukes of Wessex were the last line of defense for English independence against foreign invasion. King Charles chose that specific title because he believes you may be called upon to play a similar role for all of humanity." The weight of expectation settled on James's shoulders like a mantle. Tomorrow, he would be formally invested as Duke of Wessex and Lord High Commander of the Stellar Fleet. The ceremony would be broadcast across all human worlds, announcing to both humanity and the galaxy that the Commonwealth was preparing for the challenges ahead. But, tonight, he had work to do. Intelligence reports to review, strategic assessments to complete, and preliminary deployment orders to draft. somewhere in the vast darkness of space, alien fleets were already beginning to move into position. The game of galactic politics was entering a new phase, and humanity's freedom hung in the balance. As Morrison escorted him to his new quarters aboard Royal Station, James caught sight of Earth through a viewport. The blue-white marble that had given birth to humanity looked peaceful and vulnerable against the star field beyond. It was that world, and the 46 others that humanity called home, that he was sworn to protect. The Andromedans and their allies might have superior numbers and ancient wisdom, but they had never faced an opponent quite like humanity. Humans had always been at their best when facing impossible odds, when conventional wisdom said they couldn't win. From the beaches of Normandy to the moons of Jupiter, from the first colony ships to the Battle of Proxima Centauri, humanity had prevailed through courage, ingenuity, and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. Tomorrow would bring ceremony and public declaration. But the real work had already begun. James Hartwell was about to discover just how far humanity would go to preserve their freedom among the stars, and whether the galaxy was prepared for what humans could accomplish when their survival was at stake. The species of the Galactic Council had made one critical error in their calculations. They had assumed that humanity would react to their ultimatum like any other rational, peace-loving civilization. They would negotiate, compromise, and ultimately accept limitations on their expansion in exchange for security. What they didn't understand was that humans had never been particularly rational when their freedom was threatened. And James Hartwell, soon to be Duke of Wessex, was about to remind the galaxy why humanity had earned its reputation as the most unpredictable species to emerge from the cosmic dark. The Westminster Cathedral aboard Royal Station had been constructed to exact specifications from the ancient church on Earth, every stone and architectural detail reproduced in loving detail. As Admiral James Hartwell knelt before the altar in his dress uniform, the weight of 800 years of English royal tradition pressed down upon him. The ceremony being broadcast live across all 47 human worlds carried significance that went far beyond a simple military promotion. King Charles XIV stood before him, holding the ancient sword of state that had been carried to the stars when the royal family established their court in space. Behind the king, representatives from every human colony world filled the cathedral's pews, their presence a visible demonstration of humanity's unity in the face of the coming crisis. James Edward Hartwell, the king's voice rang out clear and strong, carrying across the cathedral and through the quantum relay networks to every human settlement among the stars. By the grace of God and the will of the people of the Terran Commonwealth, I name you Duke of Wessex, Lord High Commander of the Stellar Fleet, and Defender of the Realm. The sword touched each of his shoulders in turn, the weight of the ceremonial blade symbolic of the burden he was accepting. As James rose to his feet, he felt the transformation from career naval officer to something far greater. He was now the shield and sword of humanity, responsible for protecting not just 47 worlds but the future of his species among the stars. The king stepped back, and Queen Elizabeth came forward carrying a small velvet box. Inside lay the insignia of his new rank, a golden star cluster surmounted by a crown, representing dominion over the stellar realm. As she pinned it to his uniform jacket, she whispered words meant only for him. Give them hell, James. Show the galaxy what humans are made of. The ceremony concluded with the playing of Jerusalem, the ancient hymn that had become humanity's unofficial anthem among the stars. As the last notes faded, thunderous applause erupted from the assembled dignitaries. But James barely heard it. His mind was already focused on the massive responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. The reception that followed was a carefully choreographed affair, designed to send specific messages to anyone watching. Ambassadors from friendly alien species offered congratulations, while representatives from neutral worlds made careful note of humanity's preparations. Most significantly absent were any diplomats from the Andromedan Collective, the Tausetian Hegemony, or the Vegan Empire. Admiral Patricia Blackwood approached him during a brief lull in the festivities. A veteran of 30-year service, she commanded respect throughout the fleet for her tactical brilliance and unshakable calm under pressure. Her assignment to command the home fleet was one of James's first decisions as Lord High Commander. Your Grace, she said, using his new title for the first time. I've been reviewing the deployment orders you prepared yesterday. The formation you're proposing is quite aggressive for a defensive strategy. James smiled, recognizing the subtle probe in her comment. Patricia was testing whether his new rank had affected his strategic thinking. Admiral, what would you do if you knew an opponent was planning to attack you in 6 months? Prepare for their assault, obviously. Strengthen defenses, position forces for maximum effectiveness. And, what if that opponent was stronger than you, had more ships and better positioning? Patricia's eyes narrowed as she began to understand his thinking. I'd try to change the terms of engagement. Fight on ground of my choosing rather than theirs. Exactly. The Andromedans and their allies are planning to present us with an ultimatum at the next Galactic Council session. They expect us to either submit meekly or fight a defensive war against superior odds. James paused, scanning the reception to ensure they weren't being overheard. I have no intention of giving them either satisfaction. Before Patricia could respond, Captain Morrison appeared at James's elbow. Your Grace, excuse the interruption, but there's a priority communication from Admiral Webb at Frontier Command. He's requesting immediate consultation. James excused himself and followed Morrison to a secure communications chamber. Admiral Marcus Webb's image appeared in the holographic projector, his weathered face showing the strain of commanding humanity's most distant outposts. Your Grace, Webb said, his voice carrying clearly across the light years. We've detected significant Andromedan fleet movements in the Outer Rim. At least 40 ships have been repositioned to bases within 2 hyperspace jumps of our frontier colonies. They're not making any aggressive moves yet, but the positioning is clearly meant to intimidate our border settlements. James studied the tactical display that accompanied Webb's report. The Andromedan movements were precisely what he had expected, the opening moves in a campaign designed to pressure humanity into submission. Are our own forces in position to respond if they move beyond intimidation? Yes, sir. I've concentrated our frontier squadrons at key defensive positions. However, if they decide to move against multiple colonies simultaneously, we'll be hard-pressed to defend everything. Don't try to defend everything, Marcus. Focus on what matters most. If they want to play games with our border settlements, let them learn why humanity doesn't back down from bullies. Webb's grim smile reflected his understanding. Throughout his career, the Admiral had earned a reputation for turning defensive positions into offensive opportunities. Understood, Your Grace. How much latitude do I have in terms of response? Whatever you need to protect our people and our interests. But, Marcus? James paused for emphasis. When you do respond, make sure the galaxy pays attention. It's time we reminded everyone that humanity didn't expand across 47 star systems by being timid. The communication ended, and James found himself alone for the first time since the ceremony. The magnitude of his new position was beginning to sink in. Every decision he made could affect the lives of billions of humans scattered across the galaxy. Every strategic choice might determine whether humanity remained free or found itself confined to a slowly shrinking sphere of influence. A soft chime indicated another incoming communication, this one marked with the encryption codes used by Commonwealth intelligence. Director Sarah Lancashire's image appeared, her expression carrying the perpetual wariness of someone who spent her days uncovering the galaxy's secrets. Your Grace, congratulations on your appointment. I'm afraid I have information that requires immediate attention. James settled into his chair, recognizing the tone that Lancashire used when delivering particularly significant intelligence. Go ahead, Director. Our operatives have uncovered additional details about the Andromedan Alliance. The threat is more serious than we initially believed. They're not just planning economic sanctions and limited military action. Intelligence suggests they're prepared to use overwhelming force if humanity refuses their ultimatum. The holographic display showed fleet movements and military preparations across multiple alien territories. The scale was staggering, representing the largest military buildup in the local galactic neighborhood since the Rigelian Wars 5 centuries ago. How overwhelming? James asked. Conservative estimates suggest they could field over 300 ships of the line, with support vessels bringing the total force to nearly 800 ships. That's more than 10 times our current naval strength. James absorbed the information without visible reaction, though internally he was calculating and recalculating possible responses. A force of that magnitude couldn't be defeated through conventional tactics, no matter how skilled human commanders might be. It would require something entirely different. Director, I need you to investigate something for me. Find out everything you can about previous conflicts between council species. Specifically, look for instances where smaller forces defeated larger ones through unconventional means. Lancashire nodded, understanding the implications. How far back should I go? As far as necessary. And, Sarah? He used her first name to emphasize the importance of what he was about to say. This stays between us for now. I don't want to create panic, but I also don't want to be caught without options. As the communication ended, James stood and walked to the chamber's viewport. Beyond the transparent aluminum, he could see the bustling activity of Royal Station's docking bays. Ships from across human space came and went in a constant stream, carrying the trade and communication that bound humanity's scattered worlds together. Somewhere in the vast darkness beyond, alien fleets were already moving into position for what they believed would be humanity's inevitable capitulation. They had calculated the odds, assessed human military capabilities, and concluded that resistance would be futile. What they hadn't calculated was human stubbornness. Throughout their history, humans had faced impossible odds and somehow found ways to prevail. From ancient battles where small armies defeated vast hordes, to the early space age when humanity had reached for the stars despite overwhelming technical challenges, his species had always found a way to exceed expectations. Now, as Duke of Wessex and Lord High Commander of the Stellar Fleet, James Hartwell faced the greatest challenge in human history. The survival of human civilization among the stars depended on his ability to find a solution that no one else had considered, a strategy that would turn humanity's disadvantages into advantages. The reception was still ongoing in the cathedral above, celebrating humanity's preparation for the trials ahead. But the real celebration would come later, when the galaxy discovered what humans were truly capable of when their freedom was at stake. The game was about to begin in earnest, and James intended to make sure that humanity would be playing by their own rules rather than accepting limitations imposed by others. The Duke of Wessex had work to do, and the future of human civilization hung in the balance. The HMS Sovereign cut through hyperspace like a blade through silk, her quantum drives humming with barely contained energy. Duke James Hartwell stood on the bridge of humanity's most advanced warship, watching the tactical displays that showed the greatest military gamble in human history unfolding across dozens of star systems. 3 months had passed since his appointment as Lord High Commander, and the strategy he had conceived was now being put to the ultimate test. Hyperspace translation in 30 seconds, announced Captain Elena Rodriguez, the Sovereign's commanding officer. A veteran of the Zephyrian campaign, she had earned her position through brilliant tactical innovation and unshakable calm under fire. All fleet elements report ready for emergence. James nodded, his attention focused on the holographic display showing the positions of 12 Commonwealth task forces scattered across the galaxy. What they were attempting had never been tried before, a coordinated strike against multiple alien military installations using humanity's entire available fleet. The audacity of it still amazed him, even though he had planned every detail himself. The plan had crystallized during weeks of studying historical precedents. Director Lancashire's intelligence operatives had uncovered records of the Proximan Rebellion 800 years ago, when a single species had successfully resisted domination by the early Galactic Council through a campaign of simultaneous strikes against Council logistics networks. The rebellion had ultimately failed, but it had demonstrated that even a technologically inferior force could inflict serious damage on a superior opponent through careful coordination and surprise. James intended to do more than inflict damage. He intended to change the entire strategic equation that governed galactic politics. Translation complete, Rodriguez announced. All systems nominal. Enemy installation bearing 037 Mark 15, range 40,000 kilometers. The viewport shimmered as the Sovereign's sensors adjusted to normal space. Before them hung Andromeda Station Epsilon 7, one of the collective's primary military logistics hubs in this sector. The massive installation bristled with defensive weapons and housed repair facilities capable of servicing an entire battle fleet. More importantly, it contained the quantum communication arrays that coordinated Andromedan military operations across 3 star systems. Tactical assessment? James asked. Commander Sarah Chen, his chief of staff, reviewed the sensor readings. Station defenses match intelligence estimates. 12 heavy plasma cannon batteries, quantum torpedo launchers, and a full squadron of patrol craft. However, the main battle fleet is not present. We're facing approximately 1/3 of the defensive force we anticipated. James smiled grimly. The absence of the main fleet was exactly what he had hoped for. Intelligence reports indicated that the Andromedans had concentrated their forces for a massive show of strength at the next Galactic Council session, leaving their rear area installations more lightly defended than usual. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Operation Longbow is authorized. All units may commence attack runs. Across the galaxy, 11 other Commonwealth task forces were receiving similar authorization. Admiral Webb's frontier squadrons were striking Andromedan forward bases in the Outer Rim. Admiral Blackwood's home fleet was conducting precision raids against Tau Cetian supply depots. Smaller forces commanded by humanity's best captains were hitting communication relays, logistics centers, and isolated outposts belonging to every species participating in the anti-human alliance. The Sovereign's attack run began with a barrage of quantum torpedoes that overwhelmed the station's point defense systems. The new weapons, incorporating technology reverse-engineered from captured alien equipment, struck with devastating effect. Defensive gun batteries disappeared in brilliant flashes of disrupted matter, while secondary explosions rippled through the station's outer hull. Target the communication arrays, James ordered. I want that station cut off from the rest of the collective network. The Sovereign's main gun spoke, sending coherent plasma beams lancing across space to strike their targets with surgical precision. The quantum communication dish array that connected the station to the broader Andromedan network vanished in a spectacular explosion, followed moments later by the backup systems. Station is attempting to surrender, the communications officer reported. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Acknowledge their surrender and prepare to board, James replied. But continue targeting military installations until they power down all weapons systems. The boarding operation that followed was swift and professional. Commonwealth Marines, wearing the latest powered armor suits, secured the station's critical systems while engineering teams began downloading intelligence from the base's computer networks. The Andromedans offered no resistance once they realized the futility of their situation. Commander Chen reviewed the preliminary intelligence reports as they came in. Your Grace, we're finding extensive documentation of the Alliance's military preparations. Fleet positions, supply schedules, communication codes, and what appears to be detailed invasion plans for human space. James nodded, though he wasn't surprised by the discovery. The intercepted intelligence would be valuable, but the real purpose of the operation was much simpler. By striking simultaneously at dozens of alien military installations, humanity was demonstrating capabilities that the Galactic Council had never suspected. Status reports from other task forces? All operations proceeding on schedule. Admiral Webb reports successful strikes against 3 Andromedan bases, with minimal casualties. Admiral Blackwood's forces have neutralized the primary Tau Cetian depot at Ross 154. Captain Morrison's squadron has successfully disabled the vegan listening post at Wolf 359. The strategic picture was developing exactly as James had envisioned. Across known space, human forces were proving that they could strike anywhere, at any time, with devastating effectiveness. More importantly, they were doing so without targeting civilian installations or causing unnecessary casualties. Every strike was precisely calculated to damage military capabilities while demonstrating humanity's commitment to civilized conduct. Incoming communication from Royal Station, the communications officer announced. His Majesty is requesting a status update. King Charles XIV appeared on the main display, his expression a mixture of pride and concern. James, early reports suggest the operation is proceeding well. How are our casualties? Minimal so far, Your Majesty. The enemy was caught completely off guard. Our intelligence assessments were accurate, and our people are performing magnificently. And the political ramifications? James had been expecting that question. Operation Longbow was as much a political statement as a military action, designed to demonstrate that humanity would not submit quietly to alien domination. The Galactic Council will convene an emergency session within 48 hours. We've proven that human forces can strike deep into alien territory whenever we choose, which fundamentally alters the strategic balance. The king nodded thoughtfully. They'll demand explanations, of course. They'll claim we've violated galactic law by conducting unprovoked attacks. With respect, sire, we've done nothing of the sort. Every installation we've targeted was actively engaged in planning military action against human space. We have the intercepted communications to prove it. Under established council precedent, preemptive action against imminent threats is entirely legal. King Charles smiled, recognizing the careful legal groundwork that Commonwealth lawyers had laid for this moment. And our next move? We wait for their response. If they choose to escalate, we're prepared for that as well. If they're willing to negotiate from a position of mutual respect rather than trying to dictate terms to us, then, we can find a peaceful resolution. The communication ended, and James returned his attention to the tactical situation. The boarding parties had completed their work, downloading terabytes of intelligence while planting quantum beacons that would allow Commonwealth forces to monitor future activity at the station. Soon, it would be time to withdraw and allow the Andromedans to assess the damage. Signal all ships, he ordered. Prepare for hyperspace translation. We're going home. As the Commonwealth Task Force departed, leaving behind a crippled but intact installation, James reflected on what they had accomplished. In a single coordinated operation, humanity had demonstrated capabilities that fundamentally challenged every assumption about the balance of power in local space. The aliens had expected humans to either submit to their ultimatum or fight a desperate defensive war against superior odds. Instead, humanity had chosen a third option, striking first with devastating effectiveness while maintaining the moral high ground. Every installation hit had been actively involved in planning aggression against human space, making the attacks legally justified under galactic law. More importantly, Operation Longbow had proven that humans could project power across vast distances with surgical precision. The aliens' numerical superiority meant little if they couldn't protect their own installations from surprise attack. The strategic equation that had seemed to favor the anti-human alliance so heavily had been fundamentally altered. As the Sovereign translated back into hyperspace, bound for Commonwealth territory, James knew that the real test was still ahead. The aliens would respond, probably with fury and demands for human submission. The Galactic Council would convene emergency sessions and issue ultimatums of their own. But they would do so knowing that humanity was not the helpless victim they had assumed. The species that had reached for the stars despite overwhelming odds had once again proven their capacity for innovation and determination in the face of superior force. The Duke of Wessex had fired the opening shot in what might become the greatest conflict in galactic history. Now, the galaxy would learn whether the wisdom of ancient civilizations could prevail against human audacity and ingenuity. The game had truly begun, and humanity intended to play it by their own rules. The Great Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had witnessed many historic moments over its 2,000-year existence, but none quite like this. Representatives from 43 species filled the vast chamber, their varied forms a testament to the diversity of intelligent life that had found its way to the stars. At the center of it all, Duke James Hartwell of Wessex stood alone at the human delegation's podium, facing what amounted to a trial for the survival of human civilization. The emergency session had been convened just 72 hours after Operation Longbow concluded. In that brief time, the balance of power in galactic politics had shifted dramatically. The surgical strikes against military installations belonging to the anti-human alliance had sent shockwaves through the council, fundamentally altering everyone's assumptions about human capabilities and intentions. Chancellor Vexthar of the Andromedan Collective rose from his species' elaborately carved crystal chair, his four arms gesturing in the ritual patterns of formal accusation. The Andromedans were an ancient species, their civilization predating human written history by millennia, and their sense of outraged dignity was palpable. Honored Council, Vexthar began, his words translated into dozens of languages by the quantum interpretation systems. We gather to address an act of unprecedented aggression by the newest member of our assembly. Without provocation, without warning, human forces attacked peaceful installations throughout our territories, inflicting damage and casualties that violate every principle of civilized conduct. Murmurs of agreement echoed from the delegations representing the Tao-Cetian hegemony and the Vegan Empire. The three species had clearly coordinated their response, presenting a united front of accusation and moral outrage. James had expected nothing less, but he also knew that their position was more fragile than it appeared. The human delegation, Vexthar continued, must answer for these crimes against galactic peace. We demand immediate reparations, the surrender of those responsible for planning these attacks, and binding guarantees that such aggression will never be repeated. The Chancellor's declaration was met with thunderous approval from roughly half the assembled delegations. But James noticed that several species remained conspicuously silent, their representatives watching the proceedings with expressions of careful neutrality. The political calculus was more complex than the Andromedans had anticipated. When called upon to respond, James rose slowly, allowing the weight of the moment to settle on the assembly. He had spent the journey to the council station preparing for this speech, knowing that the words he spoke here would determine whether humanity faced a future of freedom or subjugation among the stars. Honored Chancellor, esteemed colleagues, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber's acoustic systems. I stand before you not as a defendant, but as the representative of a species that refuses to submit to conquest through intimidation and threat. The statement sent a ripple of shock through the assembly. Few species had ever addressed the council with such direct language, particularly when facing accusations from the chamber's most powerful members. James activated the holographic projectors at his podium, displaying the intercepted communications that had triggered Operation Longbow. 3 months ago, Commonwealth intelligence discovered evidence of a conspiracy to forcibly contain human expansion through military action. The communications you see before you detail plans for economic warfare, territorial blockades, and, if necessary, direct military intervention against human colonies. The documents appeared throughout the chamber in every major language, their contents undeniable. Detailed invasion plans, troop movement schedules, and strategic assessments that clearly showed the anti-human alliance's intentions. Several neutral delegations leaned forward in their seats, studying the evidence with growing interest. Under Article 47 of the Galactic Charter, James continued, any species facing imminent military action has the right to take preemptive defensive measures. Every installation targeted by Commonwealth forces was actively engaged in planning aggressive action against human territory. We have struck only military targets, avoided civilian casualties, and conducted our operations within the bounds of established galactic law. Chancellor Vexthar's four arms waved in agitation. These are fabrications. Lies designed to justify unprovoked aggression. Then, you won't mind submitting to a formal council investigation, James replied smoothly. I'm sure your military communications will verify the peaceful nature of your recent activities. The challenge hung in the air like a sword. The Andromedans couldn't agree to an investigation without exposing their conspiracy, but refusing would validate human claims of planned aggression. James had placed them in an impossible position, using their own accusations against them. Ambassador Coarthek of the Procyon Federation chose that moment to stand. The Procyonians were a relatively young species, only 7 centuries spacefaring, and they had experienced pressure from older civilizations similar to what humanity now faced. Honored Council, Wessex said, the Procyon Federation has reviewed the evidence presented by the human delegation. While we deplore military action of any kind, we cannot ignore the documented proof of planned aggression against a council member species. Perhaps our focus should be on preventing such conspiracies rather than condemning those who defend themselves against them. The statement shifted the chamber's entire dynamic. If the Procyonians were supporting the human position, other neutral species might follow their lead. James watched the subtle interplay of galactic politics unfold, species calculating and recalculating their positions based on changing circumstances. Representative Zithera of the Arcturian Protectorate rose next, her insectoid features impassive but her words carefully measured. The Protectorate maintains strict neutrality in conflicts between council species. However, we must note that the human response was proportional and targeted, avoiding the civilian casualties that typically accompany military operations. This suggests a level of restraint that speaks well of their intentions. More species began to speak, and James realized that the tide was turning in humanity's favor. The aliens had expected the Council to unanimously condemn human aggression, but instead they were facing a complex debate about the right of species to defend themselves against overwhelming force. The turning point came when Chancellor Mordun of the Rigelian Republic requested recognition. The Rigelians were the oldest spacefaring species in the local neighborhood, their civilization dating back over 3 millennia. Their words carried enormous weight in council deliberations. Honored colleagues, Mordun began, his ancient voice carrying the wisdom of ages. The Republic has observed the rise and fall of many civilizations. We have seen species destroyed by their inability to adapt, and others strengthened by their willingness to defend their principles. The humans have shown both courage and restraint in this crisis. Perhaps it is time we reconsidered our approach to the newest members of our community. The declaration sent shockwaves through the assembly. If the Rigelians were publicly supporting humanity, the political balance had shifted decisively. James seized the moment to present his own proposal. Honored Council, he said, the Commonwealth proposes a new framework for interspecies relations based on mutual respect rather than dominance by ancient powers. We suggest the establishment of a committee to review expansion policies, ensuring that all species have opportunities for growth while maintaining peaceful coexistence. The proposal was brilliant in its simplicity. Rather than accepting limitations on human expansion, James was suggesting that all species should have equal opportunities for growth. The idea appealed to younger civilizations while challenging the old guard's assumption that they could dictate terms to newcomers. Chancellor Vexthar attempted one final gambit. The Andromedan Collective cannot accept these fabrications and distortions. We demand a formal vote of censure against the human delegation. But the motion failed spectacularly. Only the 3 conspirator species supported it, while 26 delegations voted against censure and 14 abstained. The political coalition that had seemed so formidable 3 months ago had collapsed under the weight of revealed intentions and human determination. In the days that followed, the Council established the Committee for Equitable Expansion, with humanity holding a permanent seat alongside representatives from both ancient and younger civilizations. The framework James had proposed became the foundation for a new era of galactic politics, one based on cooperation rather than domination. The anti-human alliance dissolved as quickly as it had formed. The Tausetians withdrew their support for military action, while the Vegan Empire began negotiating new trade agreements with Commonwealth worlds. Even the Andromedans, faced with political isolation, eventually agreed to normalize relations with humanity. 6 months after Operation Longbow, Duke James Hartwell stood once again on the bridge of HMS Sovereign, but this time he was escorting a convoy of colony ships bound for 3 new star systems. The expansion that aliens had tried to prevent was proceeding faster than ever, supported now by a framework that guaranteed all species the right to grow and prosper. King Charles XIV's message reached him via quantum relay as the convoy prepared to enter hyperspace. James, you've exceeded every expectation. The galaxy will never be the same. James smiled as he watched the colony ships disappear into the swirling vortex of hyperspace, carrying 30,000 human settlers to new worlds under distant suns. The gamble had succeeded beyond his wildest hopes. Humanity had faced the greatest threat in their stellar age and emerged stronger than ever. The species that had reached for the stars despite impossible odds had once again proven that courage and determination could overcome any obstacle. The galaxy was vast enough for all who possessed the will to explore it, and humanity intended to claim their full share of its wonders. The Duke of Wessex had played the greatest game in galactic politics and won decisively. Now, the real adventure was just beginning.